I was 20 years old when I shot my first man. I'd only been in country maybe 3 weeks. It happened up close, a lot closer than I ever thought it would. And it wouldn't be the last time. Eventually, you get numb to it, like it's just a normal thing to do. War can change a young man, not necessarily for the better. It happened during my first village clearing operation. We'd been moving through it most of the day, clearing it out, taking a few prisoners, dealing with small arms fire and small skirmishes. And at one point, I remember stepping into a hooch. And then, in the blink of an eye, he was standing right in front of me. He looked as surprised as I was, but I didn't hesitate. Vietnam was a long way from Beebe, Arkansas. Back home, I'd never experienced anything like that. No danger like that. Nothing that prepares you for standing face to face with something you don't understand yet. I'd enlisted in the Army in 1965, trained at Fort Benning. And 3 weeks before that day, I'd landed in Vietnam thinking I had some idea of what it was going to be like. I didn't. We were dropped in by helicopter early that morning. The choppers are noisy, and you are usually packed in pretty tight. I was definitely keyed up. This was my first real operation. The ground comes up fast, skids a few feet off the ground, and men start jumping. You move fast, off the bird, out and away from it, spreading out as soon as your boots hit the ground. The helicopters didn't stay long. They just drop and go. We formed up and started moving toward the village. It wasn't a long movement, but it didn't stay quiet for long either. We started taking fire before we even got close. Nothing steady, just shots coming in from somewhere ahead and off to the sides. You couldn't always see where it was coming from. That was the hardest part. You'd hear it, rounds coming in, and you'd return fire toward where you thought it was. But half the time there was nothing there by the time you moved on it. We kept pushing. Your natural instinct is to stop, maybe even move back. But the training conditions you to move right into it. We took a couple wounded on the way in, and we lost one man before we even made it fully into the village. That stayed with me. It hits you deep in the gut. By the time we stepped into that village, the men were already out for blood. You could feel the tension as everyone moved in. There was little conversation. You move from one hooch to the next, checking inside, checking around them, watching for anything that looks out of place. Civilians look on quietly, trying not to provoke the soldiers any further. Shots would break out in one part of the village, then stop, then pick up somewhere else. You'd hear it echo through and you'd shift your attention that way, not always knowing exactly what was happening, just knowing it was still active. We ran into a few of them as we moved through. A couple tried to fight it out. They lost. Others came out, hands up, and we took some of them in as prisoners, but in the confusion, some were killed. With the anger and the tension so high, it's a very volatile situation. But even when things looked quiet, you didn't trust it. The ground mattered just as much inside the village as it did outside of it. Maybe more. You watched for disturbed dirt, anything that looked recently moved, anything that didn't match the rest of it. You checked inside the hooches, around them, under anything that could hide something. Because you knew they could be there, you just didn't know where. We kept going from hooch to hooch, searching. Sometimes you get that feeling in the pit of your stomach that sooner or later you're going to run out of luck. I was moving with another guy, and we were working our way through the hooches one at a time, just like we'd been doing, checking each one before moving on, not rushing it, but not standing around either. And after a while, they all start to feel the same, and that's what makes it dangerous. We came up on the next hut looking the same as the others. Nothing really looked out of place. As I stepped inside, I caught just a little movement. A section of the ground shifted, and a young Viet Cong came up out of it, right in front of us, so close there wasn't hardly any distance between us at all. He didn't expect us to be there, and for a second, we didn't expect him either. We were just standing there, looking at each other, staring right into his face, his eyes wide with surprise. And then everything just happened at once. The training kicked in, and I brought the rifle up and fired twice. He dropped right there. No words, no movement. And just like that, it was over. For a second, I stayed where I was, still looking at him, trying to catch up to what had just happened. And everything around me felt quiet again, even though I knew it wasn't. The other guy with me said something, I don't remember what. And then we moved on. But that moment stuck with me, how close and personal it was. I was 20 years old, 3 weeks in country, and that was my first kill. After that, we still had work to do. We had wounded to deal with. Medevacs were called in. We would radio our position and a brief description of injuries so the hospital and flight crew could prepare. And then we started getting them ready to move. Some of them could still talk, some couldn't, and the corpsman was working to prepare them for the aircraft. You carried them if you could, dragged them if you had to, and you got them to a spot where we could bring a bird in. The wounded were always loaded first. Sometimes the dead had to wait for later trips. While this was going on, other soldiers were dealing with the village. There were civilians and families still there we had to deal with. These people had been living there long before we ever showed up, and now they were caught in the middle of it, like they always were. So we gathered them up, moved them together, and got them ready to be moved out. We weren't leaving them there. That wasn't an option anymore. They would be relocated to other places. During this, they are watching their village be burned by American soldiers. Every hooch burned, holes and tunnel entrances destroyed. All weapons gathered up and either burned or blown up with C4. And you stand there, watching it, and you understand why it's being done. You know the reason. But that doesn't make it simple, because a few hours earlier, people were living there, and now it's gone. Suffering is a huge part of any conflict, and it stays burned into your memories. And for me, the memory of that day is still vivid. The man I shot, the men we lost, the ones we got out, and everything that was left behind when we walked away. I was only 20 years old, 3 weeks in Vietnam, but after that day, I didn't feel new anymore.